My name's Joe Bulmer. I'm here for Honiton Nub News with Honiton's Mayor, John Zarzinski, and the Deputy Mayor, Carol Gilson. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to attend this interview so we can put our side of the story.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about a few issues about some of the problems facing Honiton Town Council and also give John and Carol a chance to talk about what's going to happen with the council going forward for this year as they're taking on their positions as Mayor and Deputy Mayor. So John, you were confirmed as Mayor for another year at the last full meeting of Honiton Town Council. What are your plans for the year and what do you hope to achieve? And I would ask the same question to you as well, Carol.
Well, the plans are there's a number of projects been started that were unfortunately put on hold. We're looking at, put it this way, I'm currently heavily involved with Serena Sexton from the new chair of HCC because obviously there is financial difficulties there. I've had several meetings with her now privately and spoke to her yesterday and she wants to arrange another meeting. That is one of the things. There is a project also been put forward last year for in a town park. There is a piece of land which goes down to the Gissage at the entrance of Lacewell Car Park. The bridge that goes over the Gissage is missing, but Councillor Coons has been working on that one, getting that reinstated. The land then stretches right behind the Beehive, right up to the A30. Now what we want to do is to turn that into a recreation park with picnic tables and various things. Also outdoor gym equipment for key fitness.
Fantastic.
Provide walks for the dog, and also there's the Scouts nearby, so groups such as the Scouts can also use it for their nature project. That is another thing that is on the agenda basically. We've also had other smaller things like benches. Obviously there is more benches required for the town, bus stop shelters. That we've been working on the street art, which was put forward, I do believe, by former Councillor Sheridan Shaw. We're looking at that, and of course councillors are all obviously on top of everything else. They are busy doing specials, like I am part of the Honiton United Charities meetings, and there is councillors on All Hallows Charity. I also, as you know, run the daycare centre at 55. So we are kept busy, plus on top of our home lives. But there are projects that have been in the pipeline now that we've tried to finalise, and unfortunately those projects have been put on hold through all the disruption because councillors were concerned, because although the councillors have done their bit, nothing else was progressing, and therefore obviously concerns were raised to HR about that we need to get things moving. Oh, there's one thing I did forget also, CCTV. I mean, going back about a year ago, myself and the town clerk went to because there was grant funding available from government to upgrade CCTV, and also for it to be controlled from the central office in Exeter, which means they can control it, rotate it, extra cameras, which is good for the safety of people of Honiton. And we attended that, and that died a death for various reasons, which obviously is very difficult. I cannot go into HR issues.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Carol?
I think, in all fairness, you've also forgot a very important one, which is allotments.
Allotments, yes. Yes.
A lot of people come to my store who are desperate to have allotments, which I think is a marvellous thing for people.
Yes. Allotments again. Councillor Darren, former Councillor Darren. I mean, I was really sorry to see him go. He went because he couldn't take the abuse anymore, verbal abuse from members of the public, whilst he was out. But he's done a tremendous amount on the allotments. Again, contracts have been signed, but everything has come to a halt. I felt very sorry that Councillor McPhee resigned, but I can understand why she resigned, basically through frustration, because like me and everybody else, she wants to get things done, and nothing was being done.
Okay. So the last meeting of Honiton Town Council was the first one the councillors conducted online via the app Zoom. How do you feel that meeting went?
To give you an honest answer on that one, the deputy clerk and myself both felt, I'm not sure who was more nervous. She had no experience of a Zoom meeting, neither have I. We obviously wanted to make the meeting go as smoothly as possible. We all appreciated that there were certain councillors that as it was their first meeting, not being used to it. Some didn't have the electronic devices to be able to do it. Not everybody has a mobile phone. And I personally wasn't keen on councillors doing it via telephone. So it was decided, right, that the best way to get round the difficulties was that certain councillors meet round Councillor Carrigan's house, where there was a big area. He had a speaker there outside, and they would use his electronic device. They all introduced themselves at the start of the meeting, as you know, and obviously as votes were there, each came to the screen and voted, so they were there. Yes, I did have a chat with the Deputy Clerk after the meeting. We both felt relieved. It went as we expected. We learnt a lot from that meeting. Hopefully now that we can tweak up. So our next meeting, which is due now for the 27th, which will be to finish off all the Part B items that we didn't have time due to disruptions that we normally get. So we will know that, but that will be in Part B because it will be the Part B items, unfortunately.
Okay.
But yes, the meeting went as well as we expected, probably in many ways a little bit better, although I was disappointed with some of the attitude that we got back from members of the public.
And so you feel that moving forward, the problems that you had with councillors perhaps not being able to attend the meeting in the way that they perhaps ought to by council law. So you're happy with that moving forward? That won't be an issue anymore. And are you aware that the Deputy Clerk has sought legal advice on the issue of councillors using the same computer and only hearing parts of the meeting and only being able to interact with certain parts?
No, they were not hearing parts of the meeting. When somebody seeks legal advice, it is important that you give whoever you're asking the advice all the information. The councillors that attended that meeting around Councillor Carrigan's house were spaced out, for starters. Some were family members, obviously, and they could hear everything that was going on because there was a speaker put outside which was connected to the laptop, so they could actually hear everything that was going on, and that's why they knew to come through to vote. So that I don't accept. I am fully aware that the clerk did that. Now, I am somewhat puzzled because I did discuss this prior to the meeting, a few days prior to the meeting with the Deputy Clerk, explained to her the situation, and she said, well, I've got reservations. Well, we'll have to check to make sure this is all proper. Now, from my understanding, checks were made and it was apparently in order. Now, I know there is, Councillor Kolak, I believe, raised a query or is this meeting lawful? And I'm fully aware that the Deputy Clerk has gone back for more advice. She did try, but she had to go to France because her parents, obviously, to visit her parents. I believe she's back today. I don't know what that advice is. I'll be very, very surprised if the meeting is dealt as not being lawful. If it is, then we will have to hold another emergency meeting and literally just go through the agenda. Because of the lessons learned from that first meeting, it is envisaged that our next meeting, more councillors will be on screen.
Okay, so you've learned lessons from it?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Before I say that, is there anything you'd like to add to that, Carol?
All I can say is my grandson lives with me. He's a counsellor.
Is that Luke Doyle?
That's right, yes. I took him in. I had a problem with my daughter.
You could just speak up a little bit.
I had a problem with my daughter and I took him in, and he's lived with me for 10 years. And because we're the same family, we went into the kitchen, and the other three counsellors were in the garden, separated.
So you were trying to maintain social distancing?
Of course. And that was good. The only problem I had was halfway through the meeting, I needed to go to the toilet. And unfortunately, not many people know I'm disabled because I don't advertise that, but I am. I have no use of one hand and leg. I went to the toilet, and it's not my familiar toilet. And the bolt inside spun, and it needed 2 hands to open it, and I couldn't open it. I couldn't get out, and I'm banging and in the end unfortunately, my Luke shouted, "Nan, are you all right?" I said, "No, I can't get out." And I could hear my voice on the computer saying, "Councillor Gilson, where are you?" And I panicked. And when my Luke got me out, I couldn't breathe. I was unaware at that time that I was having a panic attack. So, and I sat down on the chair, and I had a buzzing in my ears. Couldn't hear the question that our deputy, Eloise passed me, and I just went against, because I didn't hear, and then I heard this awful cackling, laughing, and I just got up and I walked out down and back, and my grandson said, "Got me a glass of water," and he said, "Oh, you're right." He said, "Nan, you look awful." I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Do you want to come home?" I said, "No, we have to keep this meeting. It's important." I said, "No, but never mind. But you can't breathe." And then it passed, but as I say, I didn't know that I had a panic attack, which I apologise for. And I had to seek medical thing, and I'm now on a special tablet. Not everyone that is disabled wants to flaunt it. I don't. I do a stall, and I work in the community. I've always worked in the community. I give away mobility aids free of charge. That's how I do it. And I manage quite well. In my own home, I have gadgets, so I'm not fussed.
Well, I would thank you for talking so candidly about your disability and how that affected you in the last meeting. I appreciate your honesty and being open, talking about that. It's important that people understand what happened and what was done at the meeting.
Not everyone who's disabled wants to let people know. And I know with the work I do, there are hundreds of people in Honiton who are disabled, lonely, elderly, who cannot manage certain things, but they cope. They don't wear a badge.
No, of course not.
Okay.
No, I appreciate your answer on that. Thank you very
Can
much.
I just say on the, you asked me earlier on about what the plans are for the future, but like I said to you, the council wants to finish off the projects that it started, and obviously any new projects that may come up. We obviously got our other responsibilities, but I just feel what concerns me is that the public are being given the perception that they're not getting value for money, and that the council is doing nothing. Well, this is totally false, because unfortunately we have a small group of, some still on the council, and then you've got the former councillors, most of them who were actually co-opted and only served on the council for a very short time, making accusations that there's no justification for. There is a personal agenda out there, and I find it very concerning that members of the public have taken that as gospel without actually seeing any evidence. And what I say to the public, right, the council must be always open to criticism. That is democracy. But what I would say to the public is that if somebody makes statements as have been made about the council, don't just take that person's word for it, ask to see the evidence. And unfortunately what is happening here is that a lot of people, probably done it in good faith, have signed these various petitions, etc., trying to get the council dissolved, and they don't realise that they are basically been, shall I say, what's the proper word to use? They've been manipulated and used by a small group of people that have decided to, unlike the councillors that are carrying on serving the community and have been there some of them many years, have not run away from their duties. These people have come on, stayed on the council for a very short time, and because they didn't get their way, decided to resign, and then all of a sudden the council is not fit for purpose, as was stated, because as soon as the whole thing blew up, and I will name it, Councillor Kolak went on social media, big article, the council's not fit for purpose. Why? I'd like her to explain it. I'd like her to produce the evidence. Her views were also supported by Councillor Sheridan Shaw, who wrote me a very threatening, nasty letter telling me not to mention his name anymore, to forget that he was ever a councillor. Okay, well, the only thing I'm guilty of is I did, in fact, and I'm still waiting today, is Councillor Sheridan, when he was councillor and chair of HR, claimed that the HR committee had no right to see anything. This I knew was wrong. I asked him to give me his reasons, bearing in mind that we were working to a recommendation and a resolution that was done on his recommendation and the town clerk's with various amendments. Why he was going against his own, proposals and resolution,
I think,
and he wouldn't answer it.
I think what you're touching on is important. I don't want to get too bogged down in details of HR committee and so forth, but that is something which we'll explore in the future. The next question I'd like to ask is, what can Honiton Town Council do to help local businesses recover from the coronavirus lockdown?
Honiton Town Council, we made a start. As you know, as soon as the government announced that markets can reopen, and I have to really publicly say thank Carl, the market assistant, because as you know, the market manager is away at the moment, the town development manager is away, and Councillor John Taylor, who doesn't have to, he doesn't get paid. As councillors, we don't get paid. But he's been there with Carl 3 times a week, setting up the market, wrapping it down,
I think
etc.
that what you just said is an important point to make, actually.
Yes.
Is that councillors on town council level don't get paid.
No, we don't get paid.
I think that's a misconception.
All we get is the elected councillors that have been elected through a democratic election get £305 a year, which is less than £1 a week, and that is to cover our paper and ink
expenditures.
Co-opted councillors, unfortunately, are not entitled to that allowance.
Just to circle back to the question, so what can HTC do to help businesses?
Well, basically is, at the moment, see, what you've got to realise is that a parish town council has got limited funds. Unlike East Devon District Council, which probably has got a much bigger budget, we are very much restricted to what we can do financially. And even so, more so now that we've lost our general power of competence because of there is no SOCA qualification in the office, okay? And hopefully we can put that right in the not too distant future. Now, so what we did was, as soon as the government announced that markets can open, now I know for a fact that the market traders were ringing desperately to get back. They need a living to make. They're so much employed. So we went to work on it. We realised there was no plan put in place to reopen the market after there was nothing, official. So again, with credit to John Taylor, he did the best he could. We got in touch with East Devon Health and Safety, and we got advice from them. He put together a health and safety plan because he used to do it for the NHS, because he's a very qualified man. He used to, he's really qualified. He's got 2 doctorates, to say the least, and he's worked all over the world, He put together a help for the market. We looked at everything. We went to Axminster Market for the day, which we filmed, and to be honest with you, we were horrified. I couldn't wait to get away from there, because there was no distancing or whatever taken. Well, not in our opinion anyway. I understand they have moved now. They've moved on to the church field. Now, we came back, we looked at everything. Carl put together, he went round in his time, measured up. We put together various shops that were closed, and what we wanted to do was grab the opportunity, whilst the shops were closed, to put the market there, let it work, see how we got on, so that if there is any problems, we can iron them out before the shops opened up 2 weeks later. And that's exactly what we did. And to be honest with you, the market has opened up tremendously. We've attracted new stand. I haven't seen, the market has gone basically from being considered, which members of the public have said, not me, basically a glorified car boot sale, to a market. We had 21 stalls the other Saturday, and one of the traders said he hasn't seen that for over 10 years. So I am pleased to say, so we've made the step. Now, as you know, on social media, we were very much criticised for opening up the market by those very former councillors that were very vocal on social media, right, claiming that we should not open the market. They were totally against it, right, and accusing us of this and that, and you name it, breaking health and safety laws, whatever, which we were not. But once the market opened and it was a success, they take great delight in walking around telling us how good it is to see them back and how good it is to see the market open. Well, I'm sorry, that is the truth. But they did everything possible to stop that market from opening. But the councillors that have stood by, that they are now asking to resign, held their ground and resolved to open that market. And I'm proud of them, and I'm proud we did so. And the market itself speaks for itself, because you go down the high street now, you know Honiton's got a market. And that is all credit to Carl, the assistant, and above all, John Taylor, Councillor Taylor, shall I say. He doesn't get paid, he's been there, he's stayed loyal, he's helped Carl all the way through this. And these are the things that people don't realise.
I think that's something, as Nub News, we would encourage people in Honiton to use the market and to use your independent shops at this difficult time for local businesses. It's not easy. And anything that the public can do, or even we can do to help those businesses is incredibly important.
Now, to help the town, further on to your question is, as you know, the Tourist Information Centre got closed down in 2015, I believe, when the new council was elected, because they were going to bring it into the 21st century. Well, as we know, that never happened. 3 or 4 loyal staff lost their jobs. Some of the ladies I knew, because they did a lot of voluntary work on top of that, which was very sad. It never reopened. Now, council, over the last year or so, we've been working on to re-establish obviously tourist information, and we were looking at one of the units in Lace Walk, so that we can have a council office presence, so they have to walk all the way down to the beehives. Also, if it's big enough, other groups to use for their purposes, whatever. We have been the last year looking actively about reopening the tourist information, so that we can be proactive, basically people coming in, and also help local businesses. We've tried. I mean, obviously we can't help local business with rates relief, because that's not within our power. We can only do what is within our power and within our financial limit. But we've always supported local business.
Well, I think you made some important points there, and I think visitors and locals would look forward to having a tourist information centre.
Well, hopefully we can do this. I mean, we did try to get the old tourist information back, but unfortunately it was taken over by the blood bikes. They vacated it. It was going to be a vegan cafe, but unfortunately the lady that was going to do it backed out because her husband had some financial side of it. And I did make inquiries to East Devon regarding, can we go for it again? And unfortunately the blood bikers are back in there. So we have to carry on looking at the kiosk option again.
Understood. So the next question I want to talk to you about is regarding legal costs. Over the last 5 years, Honiton Town Council has spent more than £120,000 on legal costs. To put that in perspective, that's £113,000 more than the 2 neighbouring town councils combined. Why has Honiton Town Council spent so much on legal costs?
Well, to answer that one, it goes back to 2014. When I was deputy mayor, there was an overspend on the beehive, an unauthorised overspend that council was not aware of.
Sorry, did you say unauthorised?
Unauthorised. Okay, council was not aware that there was an overspend, but I won't go into those details because it is very much a HR, or was, shall I say, HR matter. Now, council has a duty. We are custodians of public money, and we have to account for every penny that we spend. And we also have a duty to reclaim any money that is entitled back to the taxpayers. It's as simple as that. That is our duty. We are only custodians of your money. Now, what happened was, I started the negotiations with the project management team that obviously handled the project and built the council prior to the 2015 election. I thought I had it sorted with them. Unfortunately, I was not elected in 15. I was deselected for a short period of time. When I was re-elected in a by-election, I realised that, unlike I was assured before the election that if I didn't get in, it was going to get followed through. It wasn't. When I got re-elected, I realised that nothing was done about reclaiming this money back. We're talking about a huge sum of money here.
Well over 120,000.
Yeah, we're not talking. Yes, exactly. Right, nothing was done. So I basically resumed doing what I wanted to start in the first place. Now, it's not what I say, it's not what I think. I'm not a lawyer. But luckily for me, I keep everything. It's my training when I worked for Mitsubishi years ago. Now, myself and the town clerk went to see the council's solicitors, namely Felicity. We gave them all the evidence, the lot, and said, what do you think? The advice to myself and the town clerk was, after they inspected everything, yes, there is a breach of contract here, and yes, you know, there was one little technical, that whoever set up the documentation put HCC and not HTC or joint, but they said that was a minor thing, that they couldn't see that was a problem because on the end of the day, all the valuations were made presented to HTC, who was shall we say, the parent company, okay, the boss basically, and also that we paid them all. So HCC in theory had nothing to do with it because we were still building the building, and we were assured of this. Now, council then made a decision. Now, as I said to you, we are duty bound to recover money, so we took steps to recover this money, and there was no defence put forward by the defendant, shall I say. And this went on, and they kept coming up with various equipment. Obviously, every time you write a letter, it costs money. But nevertheless, we're assured, okay? In the end, they wanted an independent expert's opinion on it, so we got that. And when it came down to it, the final straw was that we went to arbitration, and the arbitrator ruled that there was a problem with this HCC, although we did get an undertaking, thank you very much to the new chair, Mrs. Sexton, that there was a joint claim made by HCC and HTC.
That's the Honiton Community Complex.
Yes, the charity company. Now, that is on an agenda now. The advice came back, whatever, and that is on the agenda for this next meeting, which obviously I cannot go into further details with you. But there are two choices the council has here. What that choice would be, I don't know. I don't see. What you've got to realise it's not what I think. It's council had to pursue that. Now, that was only one part of it. Now, the other money, I know the council wasted £60,000 on legal fees, and that was to do with the JR. Now, that was down to the council.
So just for our viewers, judicial review.
Judicial review, yes.
Which was concerning Councillor Taylor, is that correct?
Councillor Taylor. What happened was basically, and I think this is very important that the public understand, that Councillor Taylor was the issue about the overspend on the Beehive and various issues was already in the public domain. It was in the Echo, published, and I believe the Midweek Herald at the time. And there was a ward member at the time that used to attend every meeting that wasn't quite clear, and she contacted his ward member, she contacted John Taylor and said, can you please explain to me what's going on? So he wrote a letter, and unfortunately John Taylor, being a lecturer, doesn't do anything on one page. Unfortunately everything has to be in triplet. Now he wrote to his ward member replying, and he various stated things, and the clerk at the time took it as an attack on her, showing disrespect. It's all documented now. Now, there was an investigation that I attended, and he was asked to attend a standards committee hearing. Now, what you've got to realise is that when the sanctions, HTC, I'm jumping the gun. He attended the standards committee, he was asked to attend the standards committee hearing. John Taylor produced documents about this high in his defence. The committee, for whatever reasons, and I'm not here to criticise, decided to disregard the evidence put on his defence. He had his solicitor there. There was an independent report made that was commissioned by East Devon District Council. That report was trashed. It was totally discredited. Okay.
Was it discredited by?
It was discredited by John Taylor, his solicitor, and me as well. Because I had a lot of evidence that they didn't know, and it basically got trashed. So all HTC did all the standards committee ruled was that Councillor Taylor was found guilty of not marking his letter as confidential and had to attend councillor training classes. That's it. When the hearing was over,
how did that end up costing the council £60,000?
Well, I'm just going to tell you, and I'm sorry this is a bit drawn out, but it's important.
No,
because I know it keeps coming up, and it's a picture that people get is very much distorted. Now, when Councillor Turner, next thing he knows, literally after that hearing, Councillor Turner was informed that there were sanctions. Now, when the sanctions were proposed, and Councillor Cora, I believe, was mayor then, she was the chairman of the council, both the town clerk and the deputy clerk said that you can't do this. The advice from Malcolm Dow is that these sanctions are unlawful. Nevertheless, they imposed the sanctions on the advice of the so-called expert councillor that Councillor Colac mentioned on the March meeting, that when this came up, that I think you were filming, when she said, well, when this came up, she said, well, we took advice from a councillor that came from a higher council. Well, I'm sorry, we should only take advice from our legal experts, not from any individuals. Regardless what you think how good they are, that's irrelevant. We have to take advice from legal experts.
There is a procedure to follow.
Now, they imposed the sanctions. Well, John Taylor obviously was effectively barred from the town. He wasn't allowed to enter the building, only if he was escorted by the mayor. He was removed from all the committees. In fact, what happened was they barred him to fulfill. He was a democratically elected councillor by the people, and he was being barred from fulfilling his duty. So he had no option but to take legal action against the council. Now, I know the council have made numerous statements that they tried to settle with John Taylor. I can honestly sit here and say with a hand on my heart, I was privy to everything that was going on, although I wasn't on the council, but I knew what was going on and all the various things. John Taylor made numerous attempts to settle if they removed the sanctions, but every time they came up with yet another thing and yet another thing. 2 weeks, I believe, it's either 1 week or 2 weeks before the actual High Court hearing, John Taylor offered to settle, and they still did not settle. It went to court. Now, the judge ruled that that the sanctions were unlawful. Bearing in mind that John Taylor paid all his legal costs, which came far more than council's, okay, out of his own personal money, right? Unlike the councillors that used public money to defend themselves for imposing the unlawful sanctions in the first place. Now, John Taylor, the judge ruled that, and for some reason, the judge refers in his summing up to this report, and I don't really want to mention the report, the name of the person that did it, right, because that would be inappropriate. But the judge mentions that. Now, that report should have never, ever been included, because it was categorically acknowledged by all, it was discredited. But the judge mentioned it, and it makes it look, it distorts the picture. But what I will say is, so there's your £60,000 that should have never, ever got wasted in the first place, because the sanctions were unlawful, they were warned what they were doing, and yet they carried on, and then they used public money to defend themselves for the unlawful actions, the sanctions. So that's basically 60,000 of the overall figure you'll mention.
So I appreciate you giving us that insight.
That's fact. That's fact.
It's important that the public is aware of that as well. In terms of the legal costs, I'm not going to go too much more into this, but what I will ask is, are you confident that that money will be recovered for the town?
I can't say. I mean, put it this way. I believe the honest answer I'll give you is that, as far as I'm concerned, the money, the taxpayers are entitled to that money.
So you feel
all the evidence is there that proves without shadow of doubt, right, that the breach of contract took place and payments were requested. I could go into very long details because I actually was council's representative to oversee the project.
I think what I'm asking, John, is how likely do you feel in the you're privy to information that we aren't as a public or as a press. From what you've seen so far, do you feel that it's likely that that money will come back to the town?
Well, if it was up to me, which it isn't, I would get that money back and more.
Yeah.
But it's not up to me. It's for council to decide how they want to proceed with this.
Understood.
There are a couple of technical things which I think should be there, but if it was up to me, I'd get it back, and I feel confident I'll get it back. But it's not up to me. Every decision is made by full council.
So, Honiton Town Council has had around 7 councillors resign over the last 6 months or so. Why do you think so many councillors have left?
Well, councillors resign for a number of reasons. We have some councillors that, in my time as a councillor, come in the council, found it interfered with their own life, etc., or it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. Because, when you're dealing with, being a councillor and doing things is not as straightforward as it sounds. There are local authority procedures. You can't just say, okay, we'll do this, and you do it. It doesn't work that way, okay? Now, there are some councillors that resigned. Some councillors, I mean, there was, very briefly, there was, before 2010, there was half the council resigned because of the beehive. They didn't want it built. And because there was a lot of argument over half of them walked out. That's how I ended up on the council, because of the vacancies, okay? Now, we've also had resignations after the JR. There was a group, virtually all of them, apart from, I believe, Councillor Kolak and former Councillor Brown, right, that didn't resign, that was part of the sanctions, right? Most of them went. They all resigned because basically, you know, things were coming out and they decided to resign. So that was that law. Now, this latest batch we got is, they are co-opted, they were basically co-opted councillors that haven't been on the council very long, and I can honestly say some of the things they were proposing would have needed a change of Act of Parliament, which were totally unfeasible. And bearing in mind the short period of time they were on the council, right, they basically didn't like, you know, if they don't, something doesn't go their way, they didn't like it. Well, unfortunately, I've proposed things and councils voted differently, and I have to accept the democratic vote. But I think the resignations now are more or less linked to the disputes of the town clerk being away at the moment, because there was a fraction. Obviously, the ones that Richard signed up obviously weren't aware of the total extent of what was going on, because obviously, you know, we try to settle things amicably, and obviously when the town clerk decided, took exception to me questioning the fact that there was an item on the agenda that shouldn't have been there, although it could go to the next meeting, and I wasn't aware that he was actually signed off by the doctor until he threw the medical note down in front of me. As you know, several councillors walked out with him. The perception, I've got the feeling, and obviously, and I think many others got the feeling, that it was pre-arranged. Now, that's when, so I cannot understand why these councillors are making accusations of bullying. I don't know, because there's no evidence of it.
That does lead me on to my last question.
They need to produce the evidence.
Is that, my second to last question, is that of those councillors that left, many of them mentioned an unpleasant working environment and bullying in their resignation letters. What's your view on that?
Well, put it this way. There's two ways of looking. There's the working environment at council level, and then there's the staffing level, right? I am sure that if you speak to the deputy clerk, if she's honest, and she has confirmed this to other people, one of the things I do, I see my job as mayor is to look after the statement of internal control, and that is the finances, make sure that everything is done, the staff are not being overworked, make sure they get paid, etc. You know, that's my main responsibility. Not going out there and saying, look, am I wonderful, you know, take my picture, please. So that is my main. Now, I always inquire about staff welfare. Whenever I've walked into the office, I've always asked, is everything okay? I've never had no complaints, okay? Now, when you're talking at council level, yes, there will be debates. Councillors, when they debate something, especially if it's something important, there will be differences of opinion. But there's no swearing goes on. People don't abuse, call each other's names or start throwing punches or anything like that. Debate is all part of being a councillor. If you cannot debate, or you don't accept debate, right, a debate is not bullying. The town clerk himself has mentioned on numerous meetings, some of you may remember, he said, the mayor and I don't always agree, but we got a good working relationship. This has been all the way through. There is not, you know, I went through, when all this blew up, I went through all my emails that I exchanged internally with the clerk, and I also exchanged especially with Councillor Sheridan, former Councillor Sheridan Shaw. And I could not find one email that was basically expressing concerns about my behaviour or anything like that. In fact, the ones from Mr. Shaw, Sheridan Shaw, were very complimentary. And I was reading this, and I spent the weekend reading all these emails because I thought, have I missed something? Now, all this stems, these allegations that are made, right, they're making these allegations, but I think the public deserve to see the evidence. The public has been, obviously, believed them for whatever, you know, for whatever reasons. I know that Mr. Sheridan Shaw, I mean, he's got a good job, and obviously he's champion for a well-known supermarket. So people naturally believe whatever is said. But I look at it this way: if people make accusations, produce the evidence. And I feel now is, in view of the behaviour that's gone on, which I can assure you there's no justification what they're saying, right? Excuse me, they either produce the evidence or they apologise to members of the public. And that is a fact. Now, I'm happy to challenge anybody, and I'm happy to produce my evidence. But I've never ever been made aware of any bullying. The reason I haven't gone on to social media is because I've always been taught from the time I started the councillor should not get involved on council business and social media. Yeah, I do personally, but not social media, on council business. And I've always respected that, because council generally issues a press statement if there's any real controversial issue. And I've respected that. And I have tried in the past, when the perception was being given on Honiton Forum that the council is anti-beehive, that I hate the beehive, I want to shut it down and close it down and everything else, take the lead. That is absolute total rubbish, and Mrs. Serena Sexton will tell you that. That's never, I mean, I fought to have the building built. Why should I want it shut? The only thing I've ever worried about is to make sure that all the finances were correct. Because, as you know, and I'll come to that, which is very important. And basically, so what I'm saying is, if people are saying, if somebody comes up to me and says, did you know so and so, I should say, well, how do you know? Is that hearsay? And if they show me some evidence, I believe it. But I believe that the public have only been given one side of the story. The fact they're putting about that the council is too preoccupied setting in old scores. What old scores? I don't know. The only scores there is, 2 issues. And I inherited. One was the Bailey's Partnership, that basically should have been continued in 2005 and wasn't. And the other one I inherited was basically that I realised after I was elected first time mayor in 2017 that as per the terms of the lease agreement, the council pays 10% of the running costs of the overheads in the beehive, certain parts of it, for the 3 offices we use, and certain things like security, whatever. Those costs were on the average about £6,000–7,000. All of a sudden I was looking at £18,500. I said, why? So this is my job. I'm only doing my job. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't question, because taxpayers' money.
Yeah, we've had basically the interviews run a little bit longer than we expected, so our storage on our cameras has filled up. So we've freed up some space now, and we'll be back straight into what John was saying. So thank you for bearing with us.
I was informed that the invoices were incorrect for the room hire charges, so I asked for those to be resubmitted, returned, and resubmitted for the correct amounts. It took months for those to be returned. Why? I cannot speak on why this took place. We then also started looking at because of the sharp rise in the service charge costs on the SLA agreement, we started looking at some invoices, and of course there were a lot of charges that we felt we shouldn't be paying as a council. Weren't part of the agreement. Now, the agreement in the lease clearly says that we can only see to validate the invoices, the 10%, at the end of the financial year. Personally, I would rather see it come in on a quarterly basis, but that's the lease, done and dusted. It took us virtually a year, like I said, to get out of HCC. In between time, I am being heavily slated on Honiton Forum that I am deliberately withholding money back from HCC. We know we're withholding payments and this and the other. This was not the case. Had they returned the invoices within a matter of days, they would have got paid. When they did eventually provide those invoices, they were paid straight away. So any hold up for payment to HCC was on their part, not on the council's part. Then we entered into a dispute with HCC regarding the interpretation of the lease. Now, we got advice, and the legal advice from the author, and they still wouldn't accept it. They were saying they were right, the authors of the lease were wrong. So you can think what you like from that. The council did not want to enter into any legal fees with HCC. We were hoping to sort this out amicably by 2 parties negotiating. After all, we're in the same building, for God's sake, right? Unfortunately, this wasn't possible. It wasn't HTC that forced the legal costs onto us. Right? It was this went on and on and on, right, until the end. It was going to go to arbitration. Now, in the meantime, we gave all the invoices to the author, which was namely Philanthropy. They inspected them all. In fact, they came out and their assessment was more brutal than ours was. They brought out a lot of more things than we never even picked up. And they came out with a figure. Well, obviously, the figure that they came out with was a lot less than nowhere near the, you know, we were talking, I think off the top of my head, something like £6,000-7,000. Not 18, yes.
So HCC had claimed how much? Around 18, did you say?
Well, the last bill was, I think it was going up to about 8. Our service charge were running at about 18 and a half, according to the deputy clerk.
And so the legal advice that you had from Anstey was that actually those charges were, or should have been around.
Yes.
What was the figure that you said?
Well, they were talking between 6,000 and 7,000. I can't remember the top, because the solicitor actually attended the meeting. Because what we'd done was we set up a premises and finance committee, which I was chair of, to look into this, right? And as far as the council was concerned, if everything was legit, fine. It wasn't the amount, was it? It was just that we have to make sure that we only pay what we need to be paying. Otherwise, we're giving away public money, right? Which is unlawful. Now, they wouldn't have it. Okay, so we try to be pragmatic. We said, look, we'll increase it by another £2,000. And in the end, to be honest with you, to cut a very thing short, was to put an end to this madness that was forced upon HTC. Right, we agreed because that we will pay them the £20,000, which is the 2 years, with what service charges that we calculated that were outstanding to them while the dispute was going on, and we draw the line, and then we will look at a one-off payment a year. Now, the reason we shouldn't have been there, because those invoices, what I discovered was, when I became mayor, was that from 2015, right up to the time I became mayor, nobody was checking those invoices or validating them. They were just being paid. So again, I've ended up having to pick up the pieces. Hence, I am the bad guy. I am the one that's trying to destroy everything. But all I was doing is trying to look after the taxpayers' money and do work that should have been done by others prior to me becoming mayor. That is it.
That's probably a good place to leave that
Yes.
question. But
Now, where we are now with the Beehive, I've got a very good working relationship with Mrs. Sexton. I hopefully will meet her shortly again, because she rang me yesterday. They are discussing some proposals put through, because it is, I mean, the council needs, I want to see the Beehive carry on. I want the council to help the Beehive as much as possible. And there are certain things we need to discuss. There are figures mentioned. I can't discuss those figures with you. But I can assure whoever's listening to this that the council is fully supportive on keeping the Beehive viable.
And that is something, that's the story that we will keep an eye on, and we will always come back
Yes,
to you for,
please do
for
any
your side
time.
of that.
Please do any time.
So my final question, and I think I'd like to start with you, Carol, is what would you like to say to people in Honiton who are concerned about how the council is being run at the moment?
Well, I'm fairly new to the council compared to our mayor, and very, very new to deputy mayor. With me, I'm a person that I go in the community and I help people. I've been doing that for 11 years, and I pride myself that I know what the town needs. And as far as I'm concerned, when I was quoted on, my statement was, you need to roll your sleeves up and get your backsides down to town to see what's going on. And our shops are desperate, as well as the stall holders. And I think we need to talk to the shop holders. It's about communication. Instead of thinking about other things, our town cannot die. It's a wonderful town, and it's got some wonderful, wonderful people. Believe you me, I've been in this town 30 years, and I love it completely, and the people. But there's a lot of people out there that need help. There are a lot of people and shopkeepers that need talking to, and I'm sure, being deputy mayor, I will ask the mayor, please accompany me down to the town.
Pleasure.
And going to and knocking on the shops and actually talking to them, because that's what I do. I've done that for 11 years, and I pride myself that my town is important, and the people of Honiton are very important. Right?
And just to reiterate my question to you, John, because I'd like to kind of address it head on. What would you like to say to people in Honiton who are concerned about how the council is currently being run?
What I would say to the people of Honiton is, I totally having read what's been put on social media and various statements that have been made, I understand how you feel, but I wish to assure all members of the public that you've only heard one side of the story. Right? The people that you obviously trust, you've signed various petitions, ask those people that got you to do this to provide the evidence. To provide the evidence that the council is not fit for purpose, that the council is not doing anything, where nothing is further from the truth. And also the bullying allegations, I categorically deny this. There has been no bullying at Honiton Town Council. If people are asked to answer a question and they don't wish to answer it, now if they consider that bullying, then I'm sorry, it is not bullying. And this is what's been happening, basically.
And actually, if I can intervene, the only time I've ever heard that word bullying was when Mark actually threw his stick note at the top table and walked out and actually said bullying. I've been a councillor and I have never been bullied. I would have to see someone try, but I've never been bullied. I can honestly say that.
Well, I think that's important points to make, and I thank you both for coming and answering what are difficult questions to answer, and I appreciate your honesty.
What I will say, Joe, is that I'm happy to provide evidence and back up everything that I've said. And I am very concerned because, like I said, the people of they should really provide the evidence to these people or make a public apology to those people. Because I'm happy to answer any questions, I'm happy to be challenged on anything I've said. I've got no worries about that. Councillor Gilson's been on the council for nearly a year now. She knows how I conduct business. Contrary to belief, I haven't got councillors in my pocket. Councillor Gilson tell you, I have many disagreements with some of my other fellow councillors. But just because we disagree, that is healthy. It means that we are taking our job seriously and not just, oh well, this is easy. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry, there's nobody. They respect me and judge me for what I am. And that is why I do have the support, because they do respect me. And I'm sure Councillor Gilson can confirm that, and it's not because of any favouritism towards me or anything like that.
No?
Because Councillor Gilson, as you know, is a decent, honest person. It's been decorated by the Queen, and above all, I've learned she speaks as she finds, and she's not slow in coming forward. I can assure you.
Well, I thank you both for joining us today on what is a lovely day in Honiton.
Yes, it's beautiful.
And I would thank you too, as well, viewers, for sticking with us and hearing out what Carol and John have to say. And you know, if you want to hear and read more local news about Honiton, features, what's on, stay tuned to us. Like our Facebook page, find us on Google, and we look forward to bringing you more news to your doorstep. Thank you.